Welcome back to Acorn Land Lab's overview. Just a reminder, this course is a high-level overview of food systems, energy systems, sanitation, shelter, water systems, and more to expose you to all these concepts. In subsequent courses, we're going to dive deeper. This course is that high-level bird's eye view. In this current section and chapter, we're going to be diving into food systems. Our food systems are almost certainly the trickiest area for us to fix. Overhauling our food systems is one of the biggest wins for creating a sustainable, thriving, healthy, and autonomous world. Our food systems are so much more broken than most people realize, and it's just because there's so many breaks in the overall picture. There are so many aspects that need fixing. There's so much corruption, there's so much toxicity, and there are just compounded issues that have to be sorted for our food system to truly be building back soil, feeding people locally, feeding people healthily, and being something that's positive for livestock, for workers, for farmers, for humans, for consumers. Solving the food problem is one of the biggest issues, but it'll be one of the biggest wins. So let's hit some of the points that are the biggest issues in our modern day food system, especially in Western countries. One thing most people don't know is that our modern industrial ag, especially around produce, produces vegetables that have less nutrients than the vegetables our grandparents ate. Our grandparents ate higher quality food than we did because the soil was more intact. Today, we've been relying on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides for decades. That has led to depleted soils with less nutrients for produce. So just rattling off the overview of the issues we're going to dig into here around our food systems. There's less nutrients in the food. We are spraying all kinds of toxic pesticides and chemicals on top of our food in terms of fertilizers and then chemicals to deter bugs and other pests because we grow monocultures. When you grow a monoculture, disease and pests have a field day at a buffet of corn or soybeans. Beyond that, we raise livestock in concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, cattle and pigs and chickens that are walking around in their own filth all day long, breathing in particulate matter, breathing in ammonia. The animals are suffering. It produces lower quality proteins for us, and it gives the animals awful lives. CAFOs are one of those cornerstone blocks of the industrial ag system, and they are just as negative, if not more so, than the monocultures that feed those animals off of soy and corn. Beyond that, only a few companies own all of the food production systems that operate in the industrial ag space. So corporate consolidation is massive. Just a handful of companies, Cargill, ADM, Bunge, and then Dreyfus. They sell the farmers the seeds. They sell the commodities on the markets. They sell the CAFOs, the feeds. Consolidation is so much more than people realize, and that's leading to price gouging. That's leading to monopolistic practices and all types of detrimental issues around monopolies because there's just a few of these giant companies controlling all the resources. Beyond that, industrial ag spreads everything out. The organs of our body are all meant to be together for us to function well. Well, the organs of society, food, water, shelter, sanitation, transportation, those should be tightly bound as well. They shouldn't be spread thousands of miles apart. The body of ag doesn't function when you spread everything so far apart. It doesn't function healthily. So when you've got fertilizers coming from overseas, when you've got pesticides coming from thousands of miles away at various factories, when you've got the factory farm in the Midwest, and then you've got the people eating the food scattered all across the world, so much energy is required, so much water is required. And in many parts of the US, the farmers, like farmers in California, are getting preferential water rights to continue draining aquifers. It's tempting to think that we should protect farmers at all costs, and we should, especially if they're working in sustainable practices. But giant corporately controlled industrial farmers should not be protected at all costs. Those industrial farms are destroying parts of the nation bit by bit by bit. And that's not going to do any of us any favors in the long haul. We've got to revamp how we're tackling these problems. Beyond the issues of corporate consolidation, toxicity in the food, giant fragile supply chains, in addition to just the monopolistic practices of these giant farm corporations, the small farmers are consistently being destroyed. The regulation favors giant companies. Small farmers can't afford to do business because of the way that our government is pushing forward laws to favor big ag. That all comes down to lobbying. So giant farmers are crushing the little farmers that actually can and do farm sustainably. Beyond that, farmer average age is nearly 60 years old. Farmers are aging out, and there are not enough young folks to replace them because no one wants to get into farming. Farming has one of the highest suicide rates of any occupation in the United States. Many people don't know that, but farmers are saddled with debt. They're beholden to the giant seed and chemical companies. They often can't name the price of their commodities because of the way our government has structured subsidies. Industrial ag farmers, there's a reason that they're depressed. There's a reason that suicide rates are high. They're in a broken system that is abusing them as operators. So there's a lot of doom and gloom around this subject matter. Between the food that is poisoning more and more people's bodies slowly over time, between the lack of opportunity for small farmers, between the increasing consolidation in the corporate powers, there is an uphill battle in changing the food system. Our current food system has massive supply chains that span the entire globe. That's why we saw shortages during COVID. These supply chains are brittle, they are fragmented, and they only work when all conditions are perfect. If there are natural disasters, if there's a financial meltdown, if there's another disease outbreak, these supply chains are going to crumble. That's why community-supported agriculture had such a boom time during COVID, and it continues to ramp up. People want local supply chains. All right, so that's the overview of what's going on with modern-day ag. Let's drill into some of these topics more specifically. All right, toxicity and disease. The increase of pesticides and herbicides track with autism, birth defects, and developmental delay. If you research graphs showing the issues that young people, especially on autism and developmental delays, have, chemical pesticides and fertilizers started ramping up after World War II, and the instances of these sicknesses and diseases ramped up right alongside. I'll add some sources below in the section. The USDA Food Pyramid was created by food lobbyists. It's not for health. If you follow the USDA Food Pyramid that they pushed for decades, it'll put you at higher risk of eating diabetes. The USDA and the corporations that helped build that pyramid did not build it for your health. So if you see governmental letters, it doesn't mean that they haven't helped you out here and there with safety. I'm sure there's a lot of hardworking, good-intentioned people in those organizations, but the more research that I've performed, the more research that others in this space have performed, like Joel Salatin, the clearer it is the corporations are driving what happens at these alphabet agencies. Carbs, sugars, corn syrups, processed junk, and industrially raised meat are not good for us at all. If your meat doesn't say that it was pasture-raised, grass-fed, free-range, which are all huge selling points, I can guarantee you your meat was raised in a CAFO. It was raised in its own feces. It was raised in tight quarters. Pigs and chickens often can't even turn around in their pen, and they go insane because they're so entrapped. So buying meat from grocery stores that buy from CAFOs is a terrible, terrible thing to do. And I've done it in the past because I didn't know what I was doing. Now my wife and I work to buy from local farmers because we know we're supporting them, their families, and the animals have a much better life. People often don't know this either. The FDA has allowable limits for how many bugs, how much rodent hair, and poop are allowed in your foods. Your frozen taquitos, your mass-produced junk foods. There's a legal amount of roach parts, rat poop, and other pieces of garbage that the FDA says, that's okay, that's a safe limit. The FDA says that's okay. Let that sink in. USDA inspectors have no way to truly monitor food quality at mega meat packing plants and other foods plants. There's such a huge amount of volume going through these plants. The USDA operators are really just watching for anything that's catastrophic and then checking boxes. Take a look at various documentaries. I'll put more links in the section below. It'll become apparent to you that the reason we have so many food disease outbreaks, whether it's contamination with Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli, there's no way to monitor all the volume going through these mega plants. All right, food waste. 2.5 billion tons of food are wasted annually and globally. That's $230 billion worth of food. We could feed 2 billion people with that amount. So growing enough food is not the issue globally. It's distribution and it's the amount of food that we waste. So our food systems are responsible for about 70% of the water extracted from nature. In the next few decades, we're going to see more and more water wars. California's aquifers are drying up, aquifers in Texas, overseas, South Africa, Cape Town. Take a look at the news and you'll see how close these communities are coming to running dry in various drought periods. Water will become the new oil in terms of its value. Food waste could be used for composting, feeding black soldier fly larvae, we'll get into more of that later, feeding methane digesters to create your own methane fuel, or just feeding animals and livestock directly if the food waste is high enough quality. All right, one of the other major points with our issues with the modern day food supply. Supply chains are long, they're brittle, they're fragile. Our food should not come from thousands of miles away. In our grocery store down the road, there are blueberries from Publix, there is meat from Brazil. That used to be a novelty. Now it's just business as usual. But the amount of energy and the amount of waste in those giant supply chains is obscene. Our food should come from within 20 to 100 miles of where we live. That's the way it worked for thousands of years, and it's just better for all involved. Doesn't mean we can't still ship spices and coffee around the globe. Certain products are still very useful to be shipped, and many people don't want to give up their coffee, and I understand that. But your produce, your meats, your grains, that should come from way closer than it does currently. Corporate lobbying to protect big companies. Frankly, big companies, big lobbyists, and big government are stomping out little farmers. If you look up the data, once again, links will be below, small farms have been on the decline for decades. Small farmers can't butcher their own animals for resale. They can't sell raw milk. They need more and more licenses and equipment, and that's all under the guise of safety. It's not about safety. It's about control so small farmers can't compete with the big players. Corporate consolidation is leading to higher prices and price gouging. We've seen that during COVID. There have been instances where farmers have been sued when GMO pollen from Monsanto's crops have blown onto their non-GMO fields. Think about that for a moment. The wind carries GMO pollen from a giant industrial company, Monsanto, onto the non-GMO fields of another farmer who's just next door, and Monsanto then sues that farmer. You might have read a number of these articles. We're doing a brain dump here just to expose you to these concepts in this high-level overview so that you can begin to see just how broad the issue set is here. Then we'll address the solutions in the next few videos. Big companies profit immensely from being the middlemen. The US government subsidizes cheap corn, soy, and sugar for the giant farmers. So a few people are becoming fabulously wealthy off these mega farms, while the general public is getting cheap junk food that's impacting people's health, and small farmers are not incentivized to produce healthy food. So we already talked about how a carrot today has lost a huge percentage of its essential nutrients compared to a carrot back in the 1940s. So one stat in particular, carrots have lost 75% of their magnesium compared to the carrots of 1940. And the various nutrition levels are different based on what type of produce is being produced. But the fact of the matter is, as our soil quality decreases, the nutrients in our food decreases and we get sicker. So many fruits, vegetables, and grains today carry less protein, less calcium, less phosphorus, less iron, less riboflavin, and vitamin C than those that were grown decades ago. Once again, what our grandparents ate was healthier than what we're eating today. And as a result, the American lifespan is decreasing for the first time in decades. All right, let's talk about corporate consolidation. Only a few giant companies control our food supply. We're given the illusion of choice. The main big companies that supply seeds and chemicals are ADM, Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus Group, and Monsanto. So ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus are known as the ABCD companies of big ag. And in turn, equipment companies like John Deere that charge huge amounts of money for software updates, and they do other things to abuse the farmer financially. The whole system sucks as much money as they can out of the little guys, out of the operators, and then in turn the consumers. So we have the illusion of choice in the grocery stores. Most brands are owned by just a handful of companies. We see all the brands and we think there's all these various groups providing our food. It's the same industrial products, sliced and diced in many different ways with different logos and brands on it, owned by the same people. The advice to shop the perimeter of the grocery store where the healthier foods are is good advice, but the goal is to move away from grocery stores as much as possible as well to supporting local farmers. Fake foods. Much of the honey production is actually sugar and other corn syrups that are fed to the bees and then regurgitated as a lower quality honey. So there is a ton of fake honey out there. Fake fish out there. Fish is constantly being mislabeled because it's coming from unregulated, unethical sources, especially trawlers that operate in Asia. Many other foods like olive oil are faked as well. So learning if your food is even what they say it is in the grocery store is a tremendous thing to do, because olive oil, honey, fish, these products are notorious for not being what they're claimed on the packaging. Farmers aging out. So the average age of farmers in the US is 60 years old. This has been climbing for years, for decades. 39 years old is the average age of all workers globally. So the average age of other professions is 20 years lower than the average age of farmers. We need more young farmers, and we don't need more younger industrial farmers necessarily. We need more farmers running permaculture farms, more farmers that maintain the industrial ag we have as we downscale it. But we need more farmers in every aspect of the farming community. Farmers are among the most likely in any profession to die by suicide in comparison to other occupations. That's a CDC report over the last few years. That should tell you how broken things are in the farming community if farmer suicide rates are among the highest in the economic picture. Only 1 to 2% of the workforce today is in agriculture now, compared to in 1870, when almost 50% of the US population was employed in agriculture. And if you rewind to 1840, nearly 70% of the American labor force worked in ag. Doesn't mean we all need to start picking blueberries and peaches, but what we are getting at is the government talks about creating jobs all the time. If we truly want to create more jobs, let's build more local farms. We can have high quality work where people actually get out there, are in nature, not in a cubicle, using their bodies, and we're creating more work if we have more local farms. And it can be good work if it's structured properly. All right, so 1935 was when we had the most small farms that we ever did. We had 7 million farms in 1935. That number's been decreasing steadily ever since. All right, so we're summing up the other issues around our food system. Soil depletion, destruction, and runoff. Since farmers began tilling in the Midwest in particular, we've lost 57.6 billion metric tons of topsoil. It should be the other way around. We should be building topsoil, not having it all wash down the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. I've heard it said that topsoil is actually the #1 export in the United States, which is a terrifying thing. We export all types of grain and products and jet engines and software. By volume, if we're exporting more topsoil than anything else, it means we are literally flushing all that nutrients to grow future food down the drain. Modern farming has a huge reliance on chemical inputs, and those inputs are depleting. Affordable phosphorus is running out. Fertilizers like nitrogen take huge amounts of energy and in turn money to make. NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, burns out the soil. It's not enough for healthy food. Compost has so many nutrient types that we can't even fully list because we don't fully understand it. Where NPK is so reductionist, it burns out the soil and it leads to farms that desertify. They eventually turn to desert land. We've seen this all across the world. Rather than building up soil, NPK farming with lots of tillage destroys soil, eventually leading to deserts. Industrial agriculture has a total reliance on fossil fuels between fertilizers, tilling, harvesting, and trucking all that produce to stores. Without fossil fuels, the entire food system today just breaks. It falls apart. Fertilizer runoff. Nitrogen in particular, when it's applied in excess on fields, it'll run off into waterways, find its way down the Mississippi and other large rivers, and then create dead zones, like the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, killing off fish and other species that could otherwise add biodiversity to these systems. All right, 3 more points for the issues in modern day farming. Now, I want to convey these points with a balanced approach. If all the industrial ag stopped today, millions would starve. We can't and shouldn't stop it immediately today. We have to ramp down with more regenerative techniques. Having grown gardens, having raised livestock on a small scale in an urban and suburban environment, I know that it's incredibly difficult to grow food. So I am thankful for any farmer who's helped put food on my plate, whether they're industrial farmers, permaculture farmers, organic farmers. I respect any and all farmers, in particular the actual human farmer, not necessarily the corporate farms and the corporations, but I respect the men and women who farm, no matter how they do it, for feeding the world. We just have to change the way we're doing it if we're going to continue doing that for the long term. So the final 3 points, there's a massive focus on cheap meat, especially for the fast food industry here in the US. CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, and their pollution are catastrophic. The manure lagoons in North Carolina, the chicken houses in Georgia and the Midwest, the feedlots with cattle in Amarillo, you can smell them from miles away. A healthy farm doesn't stink. The animals are up to their elbows in manure. They're breathing in manure particulates that hurt their throat linings. They're sicker, they have more disease, they're pumped up on antibiotics, Animals being concentrated in factories is just wrong. It's not good for the animal, it's not good for the human. If we can't raise meat ethically, we shouldn't be raising it. It should not be in concentrated animal feeding operations. It's those concentrated animal feeding operations that lead to deadly outbreaks of Salmonella, E. coli, Campylobacter, and other deadly contaminations. And it's not just beef and chicken that lead to those outbreaks. Peanuts that get infected with those various pollutants. Leafy greens. When you've got a CAFO near a leafy green plant, you're going to end up having contamination one day. And people die every year from these contaminations. Processed foods. We grow so much soy and corn for cheap processed foods or cheap processed meat. Fast food, cereals, chips, cookies, anything in a box basically contributes to so many diseases, including heart disease, depression, anxiety, cancer. People know this, but they don't know that our government subsidizes these garbage foods. And finally, skyrocketing health issues in America. If our food system is so broken and built totally for profit and not for health, it's no surprise that our health insurance is sky high. We have a sick nation. It's no surprise that hospitals are closing because they can't cover costs. Insurance costs keep rising. A broken food system leads to a broken medical industry. And the pharmaceutical industry is thrilled because you can't make money on healthy people. You can't make money on dead people. You can make a ton of money on sick people. And the US is full of sick people. Okay, that was a lot of difficult stuff, and it's very grim and sometimes depressing to talk through just how broken our food system is. We're going to unpack all these specific actions over the next few videos, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a shortcut for what you can do to improve all the brokenness we just described. So, things you can do. Start composting your food waste into new soil. That reduces food waste. Support a local farmer through community-supported agriculture. Just Google local CSA. Find a local person to buy eggs from. Buy local raw milk if you can find it, local honey, or local cheese. Go visit the farm. A good farm that's doing things responsibly will be happy to have you there. Big industrial farms and CAFOs make it illegal for you to visit, and that's for a reason. Stop supporting fast food. Stop supporting industrial meat from grocery stores. It's one of the biggest things you can do right off the bat. Purchase locally raised meat from a regenerative farm. You want pasture-raised pork, chicken, beef, turkey, you name it. You want it raised on pasture, you want it rotated. You do not want to buy meat from a CAFO. Start growing your first herbs or veggies. Not everyone's got a backyard. If you're in an apartment, start with veggie bags on a windowsill or a balcony. Start growing your own wherever you are. Get your first few chickens to raise eggs. That sounds more intimidating than it is. You could spend $200 and build a chicken coop out of pallets and buy your first 4 chickens and get going. Start learning about raising your own pigs, rabbits, or goats. That definitely seems more intimidating, so maybe start with chickens, but it'll happen faster than you think when you dip your toes in the water. The key comes down to 2 words, local and then permaculture. If you don't remember anything else from this course overview from Acorn Land Labs, remember the word permaculture. We're about to dive in to the ideas around permaculture and how that's a toolkit for solving these problems from industrialized, centralized agriculture. Today we're going to be talking about permaculture gardens and food forests. Really, the whole topic of this video, in a nutshell, is just permaculture. Permaculture is a word that many people have never heard of, but in one word, it is the answer to so many of today's problems with our food system, our shelter systems, our energy systems, our living systems in general. Permaculture is a holistic framework for living locally and sustainably. Let's dive into what permaculture is. If this is all you remember from our course, we'll have succeeded in all these ideas that we're sharing with you. Permaculture is the concept we get the most excited about around here. All right, what is permaculture? Permaculture is a term coined by an Australian gentleman named Bill Mollison. Bill Mollison worked with another guy named David Holmgren. Now, Bill Mollison passed away a few years ago. David Holmgren is still alive and well, writing books, sharing ideas. I would love to meet him in person one day. I have not yet. But David Holmgren is one of the biggest voices for permaculture today. So what is it? What is permaculture? It's a combination of permanent agriculture and permanent culture. Permanent culture, permaculture. Industrial agriculture is all about the parts of a system being cut off and separated. Fertilizer in that country, corn being grown in the Midwest, water being sourced from here, trucking it 1,000 miles away. All the organs are split up and spread out, and the entire system is unhealthy and fragile. Permaculture is about a unified system, local system, that works properly. Permaculture is all about biomimicry, copying nature, working with a low energy system, working with humans using their hands and their brains, building affordable systems that provide shelter, sanitation, water, energy, and food. Our modern systems that are all fragmented and spread apart thrive on fragmentation. They thrive on separating you from what you need. When the food you need is at the grocery store, you have to buy a car to get there. When the crops are grown 1,000 miles away, you have to have trucks to get them to the grocery store. The middlemen are who make so much of the money in these scenarios. It's the energy companies, it's the car companies, it's all of the massive corporations that control the middle lines that connect all these systems or organs for our modern agricultural system. With permaculture, you bring it back together like a healthy body. If my stomach and my brain and my heart and my liver were all 30 feet apart, connected by little pipes, my body wouldn't work too well. I would be completely reliant on whoever controlled those pipes, keeping all my organs connected and hooked up together. That is a fragile, dangerous, expensive way to try to live. The proper way for my body to function is my body being unified, being a whole, being together. That's the best analogy I have for why permaculture has to be local, and that's why it works. Permaculture goes far beyond agriculture. Permaculture is not just a gardening concept or a farming concept. Like I mentioned earlier, permaculture wraps everything from your energy, sanitation, water, and shelter together, in addition to your food systems. So permaculture is built around 3 core concepts. Care for the earth around us, because we are only alive because of the soil and the earth, and having a healthy earth. So care for earth, care for people. Modern corporations really don't care about people. They are just a means to the bottom line. People are numbers, and they are profit or they are liabilities. Care for people, care for earth, care for community. The only way we humans actually can collaborate and work well together is by forming community. Over the last 100 years, in particularly since World War II, since the design of the suburbs in post-war America, we have become so individualized, so atomized. We really have all become trapped in our little castles, earning as much as we can, buying as much as we can, being cut off from real community. Now, I'm not advocating for communes or communism at all. Our team believes that small business and small capitalist principles are beautiful things. Now, today we live in a hyper-capitalist world. That's a topic for another video. Hyper-capitalism is what we have now, and it's so abusive and so destructive, and it is tearing down so much of society. A healthy, small capitalist society with small businesses, that's what we need to move back to. Permaculture enables that. So permaculture, 3 concepts: care for earth, care for people, care for community. Here's a list of permaculture concepts we'll continue to touch on as we move forward. Permaculture animal systems like rotational grazing for cattle, for chickens, for sheep, for pigs. Permaculture gardening, so using wood chips and compost and digging out swales, moving the earth around so you don't have to irrigate as much or at all. Ecological food systems like food forests, increasing biodiversity with pollinator gardens. Composting, and then waste systems that use composting. We shouldn't be using these giant municipal sewage systems, especially in suburban or rural areas where we can treat sanitation on site. Now, cities are a whole nother deal. We're not going to get into solving problems for cities. That is going to take a different team. That's going to take a whole different line of thought. So we're not saying that there shouldn't be sewage systems anywhere. Anywhere like a mega city is going to have them. But composting and composting waste systems can totally work in the suburbs and rural zones. Natural building, passive shelters, whether it's cabins made from local materials, tiny homes, earth ships, wafatis. We'll talk more about what is a wafati later on. I'll give you a hint. Google Paul Wheaton wafatis, and you'll see pictures of what a wafati is. But natural building, passive shelters. We should not have to work for 30 years to afford a home. That is obscene. It effectively enslaves people to working for a system that is going to continue to keep them paying exorbitant amounts for basic things like shelter, when shelter can be made so much more affordably if we fix our zoning problems. I'm chasing a rabbit. Human nutrition is a key aspect of permaculture. Earthworks, how to shape and terraform your gardens and your yards and your homestead to best retain water and build soil. Aquaculture, ponds, lakes, working with aquaponics. Those are concepts that fall under permaculture. Local community, renewable energy, design principles, holistic health, and food forests. These are all permaculture concepts. When you have healthy soil, gardening is not and should not be difficult. If you've got rich, healthy black soil after composting, your garden will boom. But it takes prep work. It takes years of building up soil, building up biomass. Gardening is hard when you're working with dirt, red clay like we have here in Georgia because the farmers sucked all the nutrients out. So there's no secret to gardening when you've got super healthy soil. You just need to start composting. You need to pull in as much biomass as you can. You need biochar, you need grass clippings and leaves turning into rich black mulch and compost. You need to take your food waste, use your composting systems. That's the only secret to gardening, is building healthy soil. So we're going to wrap up this introductory section on permaculture concepts and food forests by talking about your next actions. And I realize I haven't spoken much to food forests. So many gardens, so many farms are focused just on annuals. You plant it, it grows, you harvest it, it dies, and you do that every single year. Permaculture is all about permanent culture, permanent agriculture, permanent culture. A food forest is when you plant fruit trees, nut trees, bushes, various low-lying berries, and other perennials that come back year after year after year to continue producing food. Would you rather plant a garden, a food forest, once that gives you food for decades without replanting? Or would you rather plant an annual garden every year, year after year after year? Now you can do both, and you should do both. But permaculture is all about how can I do the minimum amount of work by working with nature to grow the most abundance possible. That's what a food forest is. So a food forest is a permaculture concept. So wrapping up here, your next actions. Research permaculture. Google it. Talk with friends and family about it. Look up some of these authors and experts in the permaculture world. Bill Mollison, David Holmgren. Those are the two Australian gentlemen that started the permaculture concept. Heather Jo Flores, Jeff Lawton, Andrew Millicent, Joel Salatin, Sepp Holzer, and Paul Wheaton. There are dozens of other people I could list, but these folks will get you started. So start Googling these names. They've got so many great books on the concept. Consider taking an online permaculture course, also abbreviated to PDC. A permaculture course is a great way to dive very deeply. Plant herbs inside or outside, just start growing something so you can see how it works with or without compost. If you have the land, plant fruit trees or berries, but first research a food forest. Learn what a food forest is so you can plant your first food forest. Go volunteer on a permaculture farm. You can use an online service like Woof, WWOOF. Woof will connect you to farms that will host you for free in exchange for you volunteering. Take your food waste to makesoil.org locations if you're in an apartment. If you're in the suburbs or a rural zone, start composting your food waste. Set up your own vermicomposting, worm bins or black soldier fly bins to start converting food waste into grubs for your chickens, if you have chickens, or just grubs for the birds. Birds enjoy the black soldier fly grubs too. All right, we're here at the end. Thank you all for hanging with me in the permaculture gardens and food forest overview. Hope you took something away. Can't wait to see you in the next video. We're going to dive into rotational grazing systems today. Grains and produce are obviously a huge part of a healthy diet, but ethically, sustainably raised meat is a cornerstone for sustainable off-grid living. Sustainable living anywhere, frankly. So rotational grazing systems, what is it and how does it work? There are a few different terms you'll hear for rotational grazing systems. Rotational grazing is obviously the first one. Mob grazing, paddock shift systems, same concept, different terms. Rotational grazing is where you keep the animals on the move every few days. They are in a paddock or a fenced-in area. So you have, say, cattle. You've got a small herd of cattle. You bring them into a grassy paddock where the grass is grown tall. They come in for just a few days and they mow it all down. And they're stomping in there. They're pulling up grass. They're eating it. They're dropping manure. Now here's the magic of rotational grazing. You move them before they totally destroy the paddock. If you leave cattle or any other livestock in an enclosed area for an extended period of time, they will destroy it. They'll eat every green thing. They will compact the soil. Their manure will build up to basically a toxic level for the microbiota and the plants. It'll smother things and you'll get a feedlot. That's what a feedlot is. A feedlot is an area where there's nothing living. The animals are just wading around in manure and dirt. There's nothing healthy about that. For rotational grazing, you move the cattle before it gets to that point. So you move them out of that zone to another fenced-in area. And typically you're using electric fencing to do this because it's mobile and it's dirt cheap. It just takes human elbow grease to move the animals and to move the electric fencing. Joel Salatin has been one of the biggest voices for rotational grazing in the US and the globe. Joel Salatin gained inspiration from a gentleman named Alan Savory. They are huge voices for rotational grazing. Alan Savory picked up on the principles by observing elephants in Africa. I don't have a ton of knowledge around his work there. I want to read more, but Joel Salatin and Alan Savory are the voices so far for rotational grazing, and now it's exploding. There are people following these principles all over the place. So when you move the animals, whether it's cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, or many in combination, from paddock to paddock to paddock, when they tear off the grass and eat it as herbivores, as the cows do, the grass is going to lose its lower roots. When the grass no longer has all those leaves to continue its photosynthetic process, it sloughs off the roots on the bottom, which they then rot in the ground and free up more room for air and water, and that makes the ground more fertile. And then the grass grows back with vigor, healthier, faster, sequestering more carbon from the atmosphere. The grass is resting and recovering. If you just had one giant field, the grass could never rest and recover. The cattle would move around on their own time, and they would keep everything mowed down, and the grass would not come back with the same type of vigor as it does when you enclose small paddocks within a big zone and move the animals in a cycle. So you might have a big field with 10 different paddocks. On day 1, the cattle are in paddock 1. On day 3, they're in paddock 2, and so on. And most of the time, most of the paddocks are empty. But this allows the grass to come back thick and lush and green. The cattle tramping down manure, the cattle urinating, the cattle eating all these bites of grass, that stirs up the ecology, allowing for the grass to get fertilized and then grow back when the cattle have moved. Rotational grazing involves the management technique of confining and relocating animals across pastures with the aim of enhancing soil, vegetation, and animal well-being. During this practice, a singular section of the pasture is utilized for grazing while the rest of the area undergoes a period of rest. This is achieved by partitioning pastures into smaller divisions known as paddocks and shifting livestock from one paddock to the next. Enabling grazed paddocks to rest permits forage plants to recuperate and develop more robust root systems. So that's the definition from the Rodale Institute. We love the Rodale Institute. They've got so many great materials. I'll have a link to them down below. Why does rotational grazing work? And how can we tell that it's something that is sustainable other than just through observation? Well, in one word, biomimicry. Rotational grazing simply mimics natural processes. When you've got a group of herd animals, it could be cattle, it could be bison, it could be wildebeests. Those animals do not stay in the same place for very long for one reason: predators. Every herd animal has got a type of predator that keeps it on the move. Cattle are descended from a type of cow-like creature in Europe called an auroch. So wildebeests, cattle, buffalo, they're in related families. These are bovines, they're herbivores, they're ruminants, they have multiple stomachs for processing grass. And really, a cow is a magical animal because it can eat grass and create steak. That is one of the best equations ever. Grass in, steak out. So when herds of herbivores are on the move, they're dropping manure, they're eating grass, and then the predators come in, scare the herbivores relocate, and then the grass behind them, the grasslands, heal. This is exactly how the buffalo built so much fertility in the Midwest and on the Great Plains. From what I've read, there was more protein on the Great Plains when the buffalo were at their peak than we have now in cattle feedlots. Nature alone was producing more high-quality protein just with the buffalo being chased by wolves, being hunted by various others. Native Americans that also were a predator for the buffalo. That led to the buffalo moving from area to area, dropping manure, eating grass, and then the grass is coming back thicker and more vibrant. It doesn't just stop with cattle or buffalo or bison or wildebeests. You can do rotational grazing with pigs because pigs are subject to the same type of predation by predators as cattle. In the forests and in silvopastures, wolves, mountain lions, tigers, they're going to be stalking herds of boar, just like cattle are stalked as well. So moving your pigs through paddocks does the same thing as moving cattle through paddocks. It gets really fun when you weave in poultry. Chickens are perfect to pair with cattle, and Joel Salatin has so much material on this. When you run your cattle through paddocks, one stage behind, you have your chicken mobiles, your chicken tractors. The chickens roll in, and they tear all through those cow pies because the cow pies have maggots and grubs. The chickens, to them, that's like candy. You and I, that's disgusting. But for the chickens, they're digging through those cow pies, they're finding the grubs, they're spreading the manure for free. Farmers spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on fancy equipment to spread manure. Well, the chickens will do it at no cost. Part of the genius of permaculture is letting the animals do what they love doing and just facilitate that action to save us the work, to save machinery the work. The animals would rather be doing that than sitting in a cage. The chickens would rather dig through a cow pie than sit in a cage in a factory. The cows would rather walk themselves around the field to eat grass than to be in a feedlot. The pigs would rather root and dig in the dirt than be on a concrete floor. It is just the ethical, natural, holistic way to do it, and it's better for everybody involved. Left alone in the soil, animals destroy the land. When they're managed properly with electric fencing and humans to guide them, that builds up soil. It sequesters carbon in the soil, in the grass. You're producing high-quality protein, and you create jobs because you need more people to operate this type of system. When you've got so many species mixed together, these animals are not reliant on antibiotics the same way that animals crowded in concentrated animal feeding operations are. When you've got a giant warehouse full of chickens, if blackbirds with some type of bird flu fly in and contaminate the chickens, that could wipe out your entire house of chickens because your chickens, their immune systems are stressed because they're breathing in particulate fecal matter. They're crowded, they're unhappy, they're not in their natural environment. That flu could wipe out your entire warehouse of chickens. But if you've got chickens and cattle mixed together with other animals on your pasture, in fresh air, living where they need to live, they are so much less likely to contract various diseases. So they're not going to need the antibiotics. They're not going to need the same level of chemicals. I'm not saying you wouldn't ever utilize these things if something did occur, but regenerative permaculture farmers find time and time again that their reliance on antibiotics and chemicals falls when they work in a biomimicry model. One of the things that I love about rotational grazing is it can be done with just a few animals or hundreds. It's very scalable. Rotational grazing is also dirt cheap from an infrastructure perspective. When you build a giant chicken house, you're going to spend $500,000 for the concrete and for the structure and all the fans. And the big chicken companies like Tyson or Purdue are going to make the farmer take out the loan to build that. The farmer is saddled with debt, the chickens are miserable and unhappy, and then this giant corporation is profiting from the work of the farmer and the suffering of the chickens. It's just a raw deal for everyone except the big company. When you're able to have rotationally grazed animals, it is so much easier to not spend any money on concrete or steel. You're able to just spend a little bit of money on electrical fencing and then move those animals around on pasture. It is just better for everyone involved. And I'm sure that with all the scrutiny with various documentaries and the media, big CAFO producers are trying to improve some of the conditions in their giant warehouses, and that's a good thing. It would be amazing if these big names changed things around to be more ethical, but we're not seeing it happen fast enough. So in the meantime, it's good for small farmers to get out there and start using methods that are proven, that work, that are ethical for us and the animals. So your next actions: find a local farmer to purchase grass-fed beef from, pasture-rotated pork, pasture-rotated chicken, or other livestock. Those animals live excellent lives when they're on grass, being rotated paddock by paddock. A friend of mine says that an animal raised regeneratively only has one bad day. People are going to eat meat. I'm not here to argue about veganism or vegetarianism. I personally eat meat, but I want it to be grown ethically. I don't want to support an industry where animals suffer every day of their lives. I want to support farmers where the animals have a wonderful life, and then at the very end, they only have one bad day. So your next actions: find local regenerative farmers to purchase chicken or pork or beef from. Stop supporting CAFO meats. Don't support beef, chicken, pork raised in a concentrated animal feeding operation. Don't eat cheap meat. Don't buy fast food meat. Buy a modest amount from local farmers that's higher quality. Go visit a rotational grazing operation. Farmers that raise their animals on grass are more than happy to typically have you come visit. A CAFO will never do that. It is illegal to visit most CAFOs because they know the outcry would be huge if people saw how bad the conditions are for the animals. CAFOs do all they can to keep you from visiting, and you wouldn't want to. It stinks, it smells, it's a polluted area for the animals and humans. Today we're going to dive into chicken and fowl. Fowl could be ducks, it could be turkeys, it could be quail. Personally, my wife and I just have chickens, but down the road we'd love to get into ducks, quail, maybe even the odd turkey. So let's talk about how chickens and fowl fit into a permaculture model, fit into a regenerative model. In the last video, we touched on this with how chickens are perfect for rotational grazing behind cattle and other herbivores on a paddock shift system. All right, so benefits of chickens and other fowl in permaculture systems. Natural pest control. Chickens and other fowl help control insect populations by foraging for pests. Insects, larvae, snails, reducing the need for chemical pesticides. What I love by having free-range chickens is the insects are about a third of their diet. So that's a third of their feed I'm not paying for. Nature is supplying that chunk of the chicken feed because the chickens are free-range and they'll find the bugs on their own. Weed management. Chickens and fowl can assist in weed management by consuming weeds and preventing them from spreading and competing with desired plants. This is a tricky one if you have a garden. There's so much that we're learning year by year. In the early days, I did not know that chickens would totally eat my garden. I learned that the hard way. I had raised beds, I had no fence, and the chickens just destroyed everything I planted. So you can believe, in pretty short order, we installed a fence and a gate to keep the chickens out. Once in a while, they still jump the fence and get in there, but my produce can actually survive now. I have heard, now I haven't done this myself yet, but I've heard ducks will eat all the insects before they start eating your plants. So you can let ducks into your garden, theoretically, and they'll eat all the bugs, and then you get them out before the bugs are all gone, so they don't eat your plants. But I will tell you this, chickens will totally eat your garden. So you don't want chickens and your garden together, they're not gonna coexist. But for the rest of my yard, I hardly ever have to mow because my kuni pigs and my chickens keep my grass at just a few inches. Once in a while, I will mow just to make it look a little tidier, but my animals do most of the mowing for me because they're eating grass and weeds. Soil aeration. Scratching and pecking behavior of chickens and fowl helps loosen and aerate the soil, improving its structure and water infiltration. Our chickens are supposed to be on earth. Chickens are not supposed to be in wire cages or on concrete in factory floors. They're just not. That's not how a chicken expresses its chickenness, as Joel Salatin would say. I'm going to rattle off a few more of the pros and benefits to having chickens, and then just share some of our personal experience. Fertilization. The chickens provide nutrient-rich manure, which is building the soil in our backyard and on our homestead. Composting assistance. Chickens contribute by moving kitchen scraps and plant material through the soil by scratching it and turning it. Chickens love to scratch. Egg production. This is the most obvious one. We all like the chicken eggs. So chickens and fowl can provide a steady supply of eggs, offering a valuable source of protein for the permaculture systems. An egg is actually one of the closest to perfectly balanced foods. An egg has almost everything we need nutritionally in it. We eat so many eggs at our house. We've got 2 baby boys. They sure can put the eggs away. And there's nothing I love better than collecting veggies from the garden, eggs from the coop with one of my sons, and then we'll use the methane digester to use renewable fuel to cook an omelet or make an egg scramble bowl with the veggies and eggs. It's all produced in our backyard. The eggs, the vegetables, the fuel, and it really is like magic. And we want more people to experience that. So egg production's obvious. You get about 5 eggs per week from chickens, and I'll dig more into our experience shortly. Meat production. We haven't raised chickens for meat yet, but we would like to eventually. Chickens, quail, turkey, they can all be raised for meat, ducks included. Quick note on ducks. From what I've heard in our research, ducks are not consistent where they lay eggs like chickens are. So it's like an Easter egg hunt when you have ducks. They'll lay eggs in one spot for a while, then they'll change it up on you. So that's one of the reasons we're excited to get ducks, just to see what that's like. Integration with planting. Chickens can be integrated, or other fowl like ducks, integrated into orchards and food forests, helping with soil preparation and pest management, while also benefiting from the shade provided by the trees. So if you have an apple orchard and snails are a problem, ducks are going to wipe out those snails. That's a great example of symbiosis, where the snails are a food source for the ducks manure to fertilize the trees attract the snails, which the ducks enjoy feeding on. So everyone wins, except the snail. All right, so we've gone through most of the points. We'll circle back in a few of these. Our personal experience with chickens has been fantastic. We started chickens on a 1/4 acre lot in our downtown. Technically, we weren't supposed to have chickens. We found out after the fact that our city had an ordinance against them. But I'm just going to encourage you, don't let that stop you. You can change the laws if you go to a city council meeting. Chances are your neighbors will think it's pretty cool. There were a lot of laws passed in the 20s and 30s to keep people from having livestock in downtowns. And many of the laws were very common sense. You would not want to run a pig operation in town. The smell would start to get rough if you have too many pigs. Just like we don't need a cow in our backyard here. So we overbuilt our first chicken coop. We found some plans and we bought when lumber was getting expensive during COVID. So we spent a few $100s on our coop when it could have been made out of pallets. And you can get billboard tarps for free from billboard companies. And those tarps are way more durable than the garbage tarps you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's that are made in China. So you can make a coop for free, get a few chickens going. And if you've got 4 chickens, that could be up to 20 eggs a week once they start laying. Now be advised, chickens, if you buy them, if you start with chicks, it'll take 6 months before they lay. So you gotta be patient. But in today's market, with the price of eggs, you will save money on chickens if you build an affordable system. We even have an automatic rainwater system where our shed has a tin roof, the water comes off into a gutter that is piped into a big 80-gallon tank. We have 2 80-gallon tanks. There's a hose that runs to an automatic livestock watering trough. So that helps us automatically water the chickens, and we clean that out from time to time. And then we feed the chickens, grain, chicken pellets daily. But the general rule of thumb for chickens is they're going to eat 1/3 grain, 1/3 greens, so grass and weeds, 1/3 grubs. And the eggs are something that we've come to rely on at our homestead. It's one of the best livestock projects to start small. You can build a chicken coop for next to nothing if you're creative with pallets. You just need 4 to 5 chickens to have enough eggs for 1 to 2 people per week. There's even a study, I'll link to it in the section below, where I believe it was a town in Belgium purchased chickens for a few hundred or a few thousand people, and they reduced the food waste in that town by thousands and thousands of pounds, by tons. We have 0 food waste at our home. We used to compost a lot of food waste, but now we throw any food scraps off the back deck. As long as it's not moldy, the chickens will eat it up. And they would probably eat moldy food too, but we don't want to feed them that. When we have food waste, and with 2 toddlers, we have more food waste than I would like, but it's never truly wasted. We turn it into eggs. So when the toddlers don't eat all their pancakes, when there's sandwich crusts, when there's extra soggy little chips or cheddar bunnies, whatever it is, we scrape all that up, we pitch it off the back deck, just wherever in the yard, and the chickens hunt it down and eat it, turn it into free eggs. So the chickens eat all that, the pigs will eat it if they can get to it fast enough, but the chickens are pretty fast. That's our experience with chickens. We've had chickens for about 2.5, maybe 3 years now. I cannot recommend them enough. Now we live outside of city limits. We have closer to 40 chickens. So we have enough eggs to sell to a local market, to give away to friends and family. My wife loves managing the chickens. All right, other benefits of chickens besides eggs. Microclimate enhancement. Fowl contribute to microclimate management by creating small clearings, allowing sunlight to reach the ground to promote diverse plant growth. Resource recycling. We just touched on this. Fowl consume kitchen scraps and food waste, converting them into eggs, meat, and manure, closing the nutrient loop in the permaculture system. Biodiversity support. Integrating fowl into permaculture systems can increase overall biodiversity by providing habitat and forage opportunities for various bird species. Educational value and the sheer joy of it. My 2 baby boys love our chickens, and they learn so much about homesteading by participating in feeding them, harvesting the eggs, and just caring for the chickens in general. They learn about animal husbandry, life cycles, and the interconnectedness of natural systems. Enhanced resilience. Including Fowl diversifies the permaculture system, making it more resilient to external changes and disruptions. Community engagement. Chickens and fowl can serve as a community engagement point, fostering connections and discussions about sustainable food systems. Every time people visit our house, this happens. They ask questions about the chickens, the pigs, the gardens, the methane digester. It's a conversation starter. We travel less because A, we need to take care of all of our systems, but B, our home is an interesting place to live. Economic benefits. This is the last one. Selling surplus eggs, meat, or fowl can generate additional income for the permaculture project. Our rooster was getting aggressive, and he was a beautiful Wyandotte rooster. My wife and I did not think we could sell him, but she listed him on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody paid $60 for that rooster because he was a specialty breed, and they had a flock of Wyandotte hens, and they wanted to keep having Wyandotte babies. Whether you sell chicks or roosters, if you're able to, you can make more money by maintaining a chicken system. And for our goal is just to break even on the feed costs, which I believe we do actually. All right, so chickens and fowl, we're pretty much wrapped here. Your next actions. Consider getting chickens, quail, or ducks if you're able to. Buy local eggs from a friend, a farmer, or a homesteader. If you're in an apartment, some people even try to smuggle a chicken into an apartment instead of a canary, which I think is awesome. If you can have an indoor chicken and pull that off, send us a video and let us know. But if you're in an apartment and you can't have chickens or quail, buy local eggs from a friend, a farmer, or a homesteader. Buy local pastured poultry from a farmer. Stop buying your chicken from the big box stores. Save food scraps to feed the chickens. If you don't have chickens, save your food scraps for a friend or a neighbor. Toss them in a bag in the freezer and save them. Research how chicken CAFOs work and how the farmers are economically trapped by big companies. You will want to stop supporting industrial-raised chicken, eggs, and meat when you read about how negative these systems are. They're negative for the chickens, they're negative for the farmer, they're negative for the end consumer. Research the common contaminations in industrial chicken. Salmonella and then Campylobacter, I believe, are the two primary ones. Definitely salmonella. More than anything, start buying local eggs. And if you can, get your own chickens. Today we're going to be talking about aquaponics, bees, and mushrooms. We group these together because these are more niche concepts, but they're still fantastic for an off-grid homestead or a sustainable garden. All right, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. Aquaponics. Aquaponics is when you have got a water system. It could be an in-ground pond, but typically it's IBC totes or tanks. And then you're cycling water with pumps and hoses into grow beds where you're growing herbs, tomatoes, other vegetables, produce, but mostly leafy greens. Aquaponics is a really awesome example of symbiosis where you've got tilapia, which is most commonly farmed in aquaponics, although you can do catfish, crawfish, trout, sunfish. So you've got tilapia in the aquaponics tanks. They eat their fish food and then they make poop in the water. That adds nitrates and nitrogen into the water, which is contaminating it to some extent. I mean, it's muddying the water. So that's actually plant food. You want to pipe that water to the plants. The plants are sucking that up, and then they are using that as their fertilizer source. And typically it involves having a timer or a bell siphon to raise the water and lower the water on an interval, so the roots are not always in water. But what happens is the plants purify the water, and the water is pumped back to the fish. The fish keep living in their tank, defecating in the water, peeing in the water, and then that goes back to the plants. So that is the symbiotic relationship. Aquaponics is a great way of knowing what your fish are being fed, knowing how your plants are being fertilized, and having both systems helping each other. A pond that is set up properly with reeds, rushes, and other vegetative just matter that has a whole ecosystem is the perfect example of symbiotic aquaponics, frankly. So if you've got natural ponds, then stocking fish and planting the right, edibles along the edge of the pond, that can have a similar result. But aquaponics is really well suited for urban environments, even apartments, and suburban environments. So there are many different how-to aquaponics videos. We just wanted to touch on it as a really cool building block in off-grid living and permaculture systems in a tight urban space. So some of the benefits of aquaponics are resource efficiency. You're combining aquaculture, which is fish farming, and hydroponics, soilless plant cultivation, utilizing the fish waste to fertilize plants, and then you're cycling that nutrients through the entire system. You're conserving water. Aquaponics uses a fraction of the water of other aquaculture techniques. So the water recirculates in the system using less water than many comparable soil-based agricultural systems. Year-round production. That's a really cool one if your aquaponics is in a greenhouse or indoors. A controlled indoor environment in aquaponics allows for year-round production of veggies and fish, regardless of external weather conditions. Many of the fish being hauled out of the ocean have been tested and have microplastics or high lead in their flesh. So when you're eating fish from the ocean, chances are you're getting microplastics, and if you're eating predatory fish like tuna, you're getting high lead levels from all the various pollutants that go into the ocean nowadays. So reduced environmental impact, minimizing the runoff and the nutrient leaching into natural water bodies due to having a closed loop system is huge because it reduces the environmental impacts associated with conventional agriculture. Diverse crop options. Aquaponics supports a variety of crops, from leafy greens to herbs and even fruiting plants, enabling diversified yields. Education is probably the biggest benefit of aquaponics. It's fantastic for schools, homeschools, educational facilities. It's a great way to teach students about symbiosis and maintaining systems that help each other in a natural way. Space efficiency. That's the biggest reason it's popular in urban centers. We don't have our own aquaponics set up here yet. That's on our list. We're excited to set that up. But for the time being, we purchase a lot of our tilapia and our leafy greens from a local aquaponics facility. They have a warehouse, they have giant tanks where the tilapia live. They cycle that water into the raised beds. They're called Alo Farms. So Alo Farms in Peachtree City is where we buy all of our tilapia, a ton of leafy greens. They do a phenomenal job. I do not buy tilapia from overseas. Fish and shrimp overseas are fed so much garbage. It is a toxic place to source seafood from. There's just not enough control or regulation. There's not enough oversight. I've read about chemical spills, dead carcasses of other animals, even chicken manure being fed to tilapia and shrimp in overseas aquaculture setups. So I will only eat tilapia if it's grown in an aquaponics setup where I've seen the feed and I've met the farmer. All right, that is it for aquaponics. Let's talk about bees. Honeybees are a great addition to a homestead because you're ramping up the pollination on site. Now, people often hear that the bees are in trouble, and with all the pesticide use, the colony collapse disorder, there are a lot of issues with honeybees. But the bees that are truly under threat are the native pollinators, like the ground bee or the leafcutter bee. People don't know about these solitary bees. These solitary bees are specialized to pollinate specific plants, apple trees, various types of squash or blueberries. These pollinator bees, they have got the right gear, their various pollinating parts, and I don't know those terms. I think proboscis is one. These bees, these solitary bees, they are specifically suited to pollinate plants more efficiently than honeybees. Honeybees can pollinate a great many crops, from squash, tomatoes, various types of, almonds. But when we talk about bees being under threat, it's the pollinator bees that are often being outcompeted by honeybees. Their habitats are being destroyed. So we want to increase the habitat for both pollinators that are solitary bees in addition to honeybees. So whenever you hear about bees being in trouble, don't just think about the honeybees, think about the pollinators that are the solitary ground bees as well. Growing up, we had beehives with my dad. Some of my favorite memories, setting up the smoker, building the beehives, making sure that the bees have got a clean zone that's free of mites. And I'm sure a lot of the things that we did growing up with our beehives were more akin to industrial bee farming, which we need to move away from. The smoker does calm the bees. I would need to do more research to see how detrimental that is to them. We sometimes used antibiotics on the bees. We would feed the bees sugar water. The more I've read, the more I've realized you do too much of that. That's why your hives collapse. Too many antibiotics. Your neighbors are probably using Roundup. That kills bees. If you're feeding your bees sugar water, sugar's not good for us. It's not good for the bees either. It's important to research how to properly have honeybees we are likely taking far more honey than we should from most beehives for them to continue to live in a sustainable fashion. But having your own beehives on site is a fabulous way of sourcing a little bit of honey and pollinating your gardens more effectively. So having bees gives you honey production, increases biodiversity support. Once again, it's a great system for education, and it'll enhance the health of your plants by having these pollinators on site. So we've covered beehives. Aquaponics, beehives are great additions to a homestead. Mushrooms. We've only just recently started growing our own mushrooms outdoors. We've grown indoor mushroom kits for a while, but mushrooms are a fun project to incorporate whether you're in an apartment, in the suburbs, or in a rural zone. So you can grow shiitake mushrooms on logs. You drill holes, you take your wooden plugs that are inoculated with mushroom spores, you drive those into your log, and typically you soak your log for a few days to get it waterlogged. You drive the mushroom spores into the drilled holes on your log, you cover it with wax, you seal the ends of the wood log with wax to keep moisture in, and then you let it sit. And those logs can have flushes, which is a batch of mushrooms, year after year. So shiitakes can be grown on logs, oyster mushrooms can be grown in straw. We are currently growing oyster mushrooms under our row of okra. We have a bed of straw, the okra provides the shade, the oyster mushrooms are breaking down the straw and the other biomass under the okra. So we're getting both okra and oyster mushrooms from the same bed. It's another really cool example of a symbiotic relationship. We also have wine cap mushrooms growing out there. So there's so many mushroom species. I am not well enough educated or brave enough to go harvest my own mushrooms in the forest. One day I'd love to learn how to do that, but currently I'm only comfortable growing mushrooms in my garden or indoors. That's a safe spot to start. But benefits to growing mushrooms start with nutrient cycling. Mushrooms play a vital role in breaking down organic matter, recycling nutrients, and converting them into forms that are accessible to plants, like our oyster mushrooms are doing for the okra. Soil improvement. Mycelium, the root-like structure of mushrooms, enhances soil structure and water retention, contributing to healthier soil. Waste management. Mushrooms can be cultivated using organic waste materials, transforming them into valuable food and resources. Medicinal and culinary value. Some mushrooms have medicinal properties while others are sought after for their culinary uses, providing additional benefits to the permaculture system. Microclimate enhancement. Mushrooms add more biodiversity. The more biodiversity, the better. The decomposition process of mushrooms contributes to carbon sequestration. We've got plenty of carbon floating around. The more we can pull it into mushrooms and plants and grass, the better. All right, so we just touched on these three basic concepts. Bees, aquaponics, mushrooms. These are great niche projects for a homestead because they provide you with local fish, more greens, mushrooms, and honey. Many people don't know this can all be done locally. You just have to get started. Start small. All right, your next actions. Start buying local honey and local pollen. Local pollen and local honey can help with your allergies. Consider getting into beekeeping if you have the space. Bees require a lot of training to get started with, but there's so much information on the internet. You can even have a beehive on top of an apartment building if you've talked with the super and have permission. Plant a pollinator garden. If you can't have bees, plant what bees need. Find an aquaponics shop to support. You might actually have a local aquaponics business you can support. Aquaponics can be pretty finicky. You've got to get the pH balances right. It's easy to kill your fish. Aquaponics is not easy. It's a great project if you like to tinker. But if you can find a local aquaponics shop to support, that might be the best scenario. That's what we're doing currently. Consider building your own aquaponics system if you like to tinker. Stop purchasing farmed salmon and most oceanic fish. There are certain types of wild-caught fish that are still fine, but in general, fish are going to have microplastics, higher levels of mercury. The ocean is in dire straits. Our oceanic fishing grounds need to recover. So the more aquaponics we can do for the next few decades, the better off the ocean is going to be. We don't realize how complex the issues around international law or the lack of thereof is in the oceans. There are so many illegal trawling operations where fishermen, especially in Southeast Asia, are often caught up and used effectively as slave labor on the fishing trawlers. The conditions are terrible. The trawlers rake the bottom of the ocean and kill so many species while looking for the species they can sell for money. So supporting aquaponics is actually critical to enabling communities that are on various island chains to have enough fish to support themselves, but also not doing more damage to the fisheries that exist. In a perfect world, those fisheries will be given enough time to heal and restore, in which case there'll be so much fish out there for humanity. But right now, many of the top species like tuna have declined by 90% or more. As much as I like seafood from the ocean, we're eating less and less of it just to watch our own health between the microplastics, the mercury, and knowing all the damage that's done with illegal fishing operations. All right, learn to safely forage for mushrooms or grow them at home. I would recommend growing them at home to begin with. I'm still not brave enough to go forage because I haven't taught myself how. Grow a mushroom kit at home from oyster mushrooms or shiitake mushrooms. Buy one of the logs that you can set up in your backyard, or source your own logs and buy a shiitake mushroom kit. All right, that's a wrap. That's the end of aquaponics, mushrooms, and honey. I will see you in the next video. Today we're talking about biochar. So biochar is just a fancy term for charcoal, carbon, that is inoculated with nutrients to be a microbial home. So there's a lot of differing opinions out there around definitions, but when you boil it down, biochar is wood that has been turned into charcoal that's inoculated with nutrients to form a hotel for microbes. And it's got so many benefits in the garden. First and foremost, with composting. So first, let's talk about how we make biochar. We'll take old pallets, wood pallets that are not treated. We do not want toxic, chemically treated pallets with wood preservatives. We'll take wood pallets, we'll take sticks, we'll take small pieces of logs, we'll cut them up in small pieces. We have built a double barrel retort. There's a lot of ways to build a double barrel retort. Typically we just use like oil containers, oil canisters, oil drums. But there's many ways of making biochar. This is just one of many different variations. So our double barrel retort has got a small 30-gallon drum on the inside, then a bigger oil drum on the outside, and these are made out of steel. The drums have a lid that can be removed from each one, and then we drill air holes in the sides of each drum. So the inner drum is filled with our feedstock, whatever woody biomass we want to turn into biochar. And then on the outside, we put our fuel. So we have sticks, and then we've got pieces of wood that we've cut in thin slivers. The outside ring is going to burn. The inside feedstock will be baked and converted into charcoal to be later processed into biochar. So we put a cap on that overall drum. It's got a chimney on it. We'll post some photos and links to videos down below or add one over the video here. And then we set the fuel on fire. It takes about 2 hours, but the fuel burns down and it totally bakes all the fuel on the inside, or the feedstock rather, on the inside. Then when we open it up, once it's cooled down, we can take out that woody biomass that's turned to charcoal and crush it and crumble it in just a pure black carbon. But all those pieces, the wood structure, is preserved. What happens in that process is called pyrolysis. Wood burns twice. Wood will burn off the gases, the hydrogen and the other gases locked inside the wood first. Then it'll burn off the carbon structure second. We don't want to burn off the carbon structure to make biochar. Otherwise, you just have ash. If you have a campfire and you let it burn totally, the wood will burn twice, the gases will burn first, then the carbon structure will burn off, and you're left with just ash. You want to prevent that second burn in order to make charcoal for biochar. So that's the double barrel retort. The other method we have is our fire pit, which is called a fire pit kiln. It's made to where the sides expand out. We fill it with a layer of materials, set that on fire, then put another layer of sticks on, and we just keep layering sticks on. That makes something called a fire cap. The fire on top keeps oxygen from burning the wood on the bottom totally. So we're making layer after layer after layer of charcoal. We've got another video of us using that system just to make biochar in a little bit more labor-intensive way, but it's great if you're doing a campfire with friends. Then we hose it down before it all burns off. So we will hose it down when it's all black charred charcoal. We've talked a little bit about how we make biochar. Let's talk about why we make biochar. Biochar provides this carbon sponge which retains water. It gives microbes a home. The microbes are key for the plants taking up nutrients, allowing mycelium to grow. Soil is this complex web of life, and charcoal inoculated with nutrients, whether that is liquid fertilizer, some people even use urine to inoculate their biochar. You just want nutrient-rich liquid, and it can even be compost. Mix your biochar charcoal in the compost. Over time, the nutrients, the microbial life will explode in those chunks of charcoal, and then you've got biochar. We like to inoculate our biochar in liquid fertilizer or compost and then crush it. We crush it finely. We run a truck over basically a packet of biochar. We put the charcoal in a billboard tarp, which is very durable. We get those for free. Then we run the truck over it. I know there are better ways of doing it. One day we'd like to get a grinder where we can just grind or blend the biochar and crush it that way. For now, running the truck over the biochar with a piece of plywood works pretty well to get it crushed finer. Biochar use actually goes back thousands of years. Tribes in South America would use biochar to make terra preta, which means black earth. Soil in the jungle is notoriously poor in nutrient value and quality, but when you take carbon, when you take charcoal, inoculate it with nutrients, mix that into the soil, that locks carbon into the soil for hundreds of years. And it allows the soil to soak up more water, more nutrients, and give the plants a better home. So let's list a few more of the benefits of biochar. Soil improvement. Biochar is a stable form of carbon that can enhance soil structure, porosity, and water retention, improving overall soil quality. When a stick or a log falls from a tree, when it rots, most of it goes up into the air. The carbon, as it decays, is respirated by microbes and goes back into the air, believe it or not. When you make biochar, you lock that carbon into being in the soil for hundreds of years. So it's a fantastic way to sequester carbon and build soil. Nutrient retention. Biochar has high surface area that can absorb nutrients and minerals, preventing leaching and making them more available to plants. Microbial habitat. Biochar provides a habitat for beneficial microorganisms that contribute to soil health, nutrient cycling, and plant growth. pH regulation. Depending on its source and production method, biochar can regulate soil pH, creating a more favorable environment for plant roots. Reduce erosion. Incorporating biochar into soil can increase its stability, reducing erosion and the loss of topsoil. If you add biochar to a clay soil like we have here in Georgia, it makes it more loamy and friable. If you add biochar to a very loose sandy soil, it helps it have more sticking power. It's a great balancing medium. Toxic absorption. Biochar has the ability to absorb and immobilize various pollutants, which is fantastic since we live in a world with plenty of contaminants that we need to soak up. Longevity. Biochar's slow decomposition rate means its benefits can persist in the soil for many years, providing lasting improvements. Waste recycling. Biochar can be produced from various organic waste materials, many agricultural materials, contributing to waste reduction and sustainable resource management. If we didn't make biochar with all of our sticks, you don't compost sticks. They would take years to break down. But when we take our sticks that fall on our lots, rather than let the county take them off, we make them into biochar, which is a great way of keeping that nutrient base, that carbon base on our land, making better soil. Enhanced plant growth. Plants grown in biochar-amended soils often exhibit increased growth rates, improved health, and higher yields. It's great for suppressing disease in plants, for adding to composting, increasing fertilizer efficiency, and even reducing greenhouse gas emissions by locking in the carbon. All right, next actions. Make your own biochar at home in a fire pit or a pit in the ground. There's plenty of tutorials on how to make that biochar. We'll link to some down below. Purchase biochar for your own plants and garden. If you don't make your own, go purchase some and see if it helps your plants in your potted plants or your grow bags. Research the many uses of biochar and activated charcoal. Finally, learn about using charcoal for water purification. You can make your own charcoal, and before you turn it into biochar, use it to make a water purifier. There are so many ways to use charcoal and biochar. Today we're going to be talking about black soldier flies and red wrigglers, worms. So we're talking about bugs and creepy crawlies today and how they fit into an off-grid picture. My favorite bug on our homestead has got to be the black soldier fly. So we're going to start there. You might have seen our black soldier fly videos on our social media accounts. I didn't know what a black soldier fly was until the last 2 years. We researched food and feedstocks you could produce locally for chickens, pigs, fish. I was researching and I discovered something online called BSF, acronym for black soldier fly. And I was intrigued because I read that black soldier flies can eat food waste, the nastiest, most rotten, putrid food waste. Obviously, they eat the good stuff too, but black soldier flies will eat stuff you would never A, eat yourself, or B, feed to your chickens, pigs, or other livestock. So we don't often have leftovers that go bad in our fridge, and when we do, they're not terribly bad. They hardly ever get moldy, so we often just feed leftovers to chickens and pigs in our backyard. But on the rare occasion where something has just gone terribly, terribly wrong in our refrigerator, the black soldier flies love it. It could be rotted meat, it could be spoiled milk, it could be moldy cheese. The BSF will strip it clean, and then they are effectively acting like a filter to where they've eaten a nutrient source that could poison our chickens. But the black soldier flies themselves are perfectly fine food for the chickens. So think about black soldier flies as being like a filter between gross food your chickens would never eat or your pigs would never eat to converting it to high protein, high fat grubs, because that's what a black soldier fly is. It is a grub. The black soldier fly adult looks like a black wasp. When you see a photo of them or a video clip, you'll recognize the black soldier fly. They're endemic to much of the world. They're native to North America. You can find them in parts of Europe, parts of the Middle East, China, Africa, South America. They're all over the place. So you probably won't have a hard time finding black soldier flies or attracting them to populate in your food bins. So we love BSF. I'm going to call them BSF from now on just because it's shorter. We love BSF because they're high protein, high fat insect that our chickens gobble up like candy. Our pigs will eat them too, if the pigs can get to them. But our chickens are so much faster, they'll swoop in and pick all the BSF out of the ground first. But the life cycle of a black soldier fly is pretty simple. The adult female flies into our biopod. And I'll have a link to the biopod below and a link to a DIY biopod. Biopod is just the container where you put food waste, coffee grounds, sometimes a little grass clippings, and then cardboard for them to lay their eggs on. That's your environment for black soldier flies. The biopod is set up with a holding area for your food wastes, then a ramp, because once the grubs mature, they climb up the ramp. They're looking for soil to become dormant in as they grow into a full-blown fly. And then in the ramp, there's a slit and they fall down the slit. They self-harvest, as crazy as that sounds. There is a container in our biopod where they all fall into. So every few days we walk out there, we've got a few inches of black soldier flies in the bottom of the container, and we'll shake those out as a protein source and a fat source for our chickens. Ducks will eat them, songbirds will eat them, pigs will eat them. We take our food scraps, from church. We have potluck most Sundays. I bring a 5-gallon bucket. The whole congregation knows to take their food waste, put it in the bucket. So you can get scraps from church. You can get scraps from local community events. If you've talked with, the planners, restaurants are amazing for getting food waste. And you often wouldn't feed that type of waste to your chickens or pigs because you don't know how old it is. That's not an issue for your black soldier flies. So a few of the other benefits of black soldier flies: they eat waste products nothing else would touch other than your methane digester. You're converting it to a high quality insect protein for free. It's keeping food and biological material out of landfills, and you are reducing your chicken feed costs. So BSF are effective organic waste management agents. They've got a high nutrient content. They make for sustainable animal feed. They're natural decomposers. This is going to sound gross, but if you have a dead animal on the property, if your BSF system is far enough away from your home, or if it's a big enough system, if you've got a roadkill, a squirrel, raccoon, possum, obviously you could bury it. It'd be a shame to throw it in the trash, but you can toss it in there with the BSF. They will strip it clean and turn it into high quality protein for your chickens. We've done that before with squirrels that have died on the property. And the BSF will pick it clean like piranha. I kid you not. I've taken food waste from, restaurants or family picnics where we've had uneaten chicken bones or chicken wings. The next day, the BSF will have picked it clean, just like piranha do. And they're just black grubs about this long. After they mature in the soil, they then turn into their fly form, and they're harmless as an adult fly. They don't even have mouths. They cannot eat. They literally exist as an adult just to procreate, lay eggs, and then die within a few days. So most of their life is in grub form. When they are adolescent grubs, they're going to be a white color. You don't want to harvest them when they're white. When they turn black, they're mature and they're much bigger. And that's when they migrate up, they fall in the bin, then you harvest them. One thing we've noticed with the BSF in particular is if there's a thunderstorm, something about the thunder, those vibrations cause the BSF to self-harvest in waves. So after a thunderstorm is a great time to harvest black soldier fly larvae from your system. One day I would like to try to replicate the boom of thunder to try to make the harvests more regular. Because if you start BSF, you'll realize it's not like you're getting a harvest every single day. They don't work on a clockwork schedule. You'll get a few pounds, and then you won't get any for a few days or a week. So they come in waves. So the BSF are basically competing for the nasty food waste or even roadkill that we could feed to a methane digester. It's amazing how, fresh food waste can go straight to the chickens or pigs. Moldy food waste can go to the methane digester or the black soldier flies or compost systems. There's so many uses for food waste. You just have to start building your systems. So let's switch gears because we've talked about black soldier flies. We'll include links to the Biopod and the DIY system below, but they are a wonderful system to have on your homestead. Whether it's urban, suburban, rural, you can do them in a small space. Before I forget, the way that you set the system up involves taking coffee grounds or soil, grass clippings, using that as a base. Then you put food waste in there to attract the black soldier flies. It can take a few weeks. Don't be discouraged if it does take a few weeks for them to come in. Sometimes you'll attract houseflies first, but the amazing thing about black soldier flies is once they set up shop and they've got their colony rocking and rolling with all those grubs, they drive away the houseflies, and we still don't understand why. The research has been done, but scientists don't know why that happens. But once you get the BSF going, the houseflies are no longer an issue, and they eat food so quickly, smell is really not a problem either. It could smell a little funky when you're setting it up, so just hang in there, wait till they're attracted. But once the BSF have set up their colony, their pheromones attract more BSF. We put cardboard on top of the system, on top of the food waste, because that's where the females like to lay their eggs. They lay their eggs, the larvae hatch, they eat the food waste, they mature, they self-harvest, you feed them to your chickens. So that's the BSF overview. Let's talk about red wrigglers. Not as much material here, but we still love using them here on our homestead. We purchased a few pounds of red wrigglers from Uncle Jim's worm farm, and they ship through the mail. We then set up a triple bucket vermicomposting system. I'll have a link to that video below. But that system allows us to put the worms in with food waste and shredded damp newspaper. They're going to eat all the food waste and they're going to poop out worm castings, which are amazing for fertilizer and nutrients for your compost and gardens. What happens in that triple bucket vermicomposting system is once the worms have eaten all the food, you then swap your buckets and fill up a new empty bucket with no worms with food waste. Put that on top. Put the worm bucket with worms and no food and worm poop down below. The worms will then migrate to where the food is. That allows you to take out the worm castings, and the entire system has holes throughout it with a final bucket on the bottom, which allows all the worm tea, it's worm pee, but we call it worm tea, to drip down, and then that's another amazing natural organic fertilizer for the garden. So the worm poop is a killer fertilizer. The worm castings are great for your garden. As you build bigger worm colonies, you can share the worms with others, you can sell them as bait, you can start selling them yourself online. There's all kinds of ways to use the worms, or just put them straight in your garden. The more worms in your garden, the better, because they create all those holes, which gives your plants more air, because plants need air in addition to soil. So you want a whole worm village in your garden if you can create it. That's a sign of very healthy soil. Red wrigglers eat more voraciously than night crawlers do. That's why we recommend using red wrigglers for your vermicomposting system. In this video within the food chapter, we're going to be talking about cooking with solar energy and with biogas. These are some of my favorite systems that we use in the Acorn Land Lab. These systems are pretty new, the ones that we use. And they are so powerful, and they are so common sense for off-grid living, for sustainable living, for affordable, minimalistic living. Cooking is the name of the game today. We've talked a lot about the food systems. You know, the poultry, and we've got our kuni pigs out back, which we are raising those for breeding. We're not eating those two pigs, Penny and Maple. We do use their manure, though, for the home biogas system. We've talked about chickens. We've talked about permaculture gardens and food forests. So there are a number of ways, you know, beekeeping, mushrooms, aquaponics. We've covered a lot of that. Those are all methods for producing food where you are locally. Once you produce the food, you need to cook the food. When we humans cook food, it makes so many more nutrients available to our bodies. Cooking is as old as the hills. It's something you have to do whether you're on grid, off grid, or somewhere in between. So let's talk about cooking with solar first. Our favorite go-to brand for solar cooking is Gosun. Gosun is based up in Ohio. We absolutely love their line of products. They are a really innovative group. Gosun produces these solar ovens that have a parabolic mirror at the back and then a vacuum glass tube. The vacuum glass tube is the trick because all that sunlight is concentrated on the vacuum glass tube. And because of the vacuum, heat is trapped and builds in that tube. And there's a metal tray that has a handle where you put your food and you slide that in there. So within 20 minutes, you can get temps up to 400 or 500 degrees to cook chicken, beef, pork, vegetables, potatoes, rice, casseroles, egg frittatas, blueberry muffins, you name it, you can cook it in a Gosun. And they make different sized ovens. They've got a mini oven, a regular sized oven. They've got a big Gosun grill and a fusion. The newer models of these solar ovens are awesome because they allow you to plug it into 12-volt power if you're wanting to cook on a shady, overcast day. So the cool thing about cooking with solar energy directly from the sun is it doesn't matter if it's 90 degrees out or 20 degrees outside. It's the sunlight, not the ambient temperature that's used to cook the food. So it could be winter or summer, spring or fall, and you can cook food outdoors using sunlight. Gosun is definitely the main innovator with these solar ovens. There are a few other brands as well that you can use. We have not found one that we like more than Gosun yet. Gosun is just so ergonomic. They're relatively affordable. They're very sturdy and durable. And their vision is just great for giving people fuel-free cooking appliances. And Gosun has quite a few other products as well, but today we're going to focus on the solar ovens. We've cooked tilapia, chicken, eggs, rice, vegetables, sweet potatoes. We've cooked a ton of the produce from our garden in our Gosun ovens. So the Gosun oven, it's almost impossible to burn food in it because it kind of does a combination of searing and steaming the food. It's a whole different way of cooking, so you kind of have to learn how to work with that cooking method, but it cooks very quickly considering it's a solar-powered oven. We'll have some links for some DIY solar ovens down below. We have not made a DIY version yet just because we're so happy with the Gosun products, but we would like to eventually, because the one thing the Gosun products cannot do, it's not big enough to have like a Dutch oven in or a big metal pot. There are other solar ovens that we've seen where you can take your own cookware and put it within it because it's a big box. So Gosun, they don't have a use case for that yet, but we've loved the products and we've been really happy with just the relaxed vibe of cooking with sunlight. You're not using propane, you're not even using methane. And if it is a shady day, we take our battery pack out that we charge with our solar panels. It's a Delta EcoFlow. And the Gosun ovens plug straight into a 12-volt battery pack, or they plug into a car on a cigarette lighter, and you can cook your food that way as well. So that flexibility is incredible. That's why we like the biogas also, because if it is a shady day and we don't have a 12-volt capable Gosun oven, we can simply cook on our methane burner with home biogas. So I suppose that's a pretty good segue to talk about biogas. Biogas is basically methane. Methane is generated when organic material, food waste, manure is in an aqueous environment, so water. When you've got manure, when you've got decomposition, when you've got food waste or animal that's rotting in water, if there are methanogens, which naturally occur in cow manure, pig manure, other types of animal manure, and in swamps, methanogens are the bacteria that break down the organic matter and they release methane. They bubble up methane. So swamps, if you go visit a swamp and it's bubbling, you see little bubbles coming out of the water, or a wetlands, that's often methane, which just is released into the atmosphere. Methane is a far more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. The methane digester that we use and love is made by Home Biogas. Home Biogas is an Israeli company. The methane digesters cost about $900. They'll pay for themselves in a few years just with liquid fertilizer and with all the free cooking fuel you get. But the methane digester is essentially a big black plastic rubber bag that you fill up with a few hundred gallons of water. You mix in a slurry of organic cow manure that gives you the methanogens. That is the ickiest step of the process. It's a rite of passage. I did it. Our other garden director has done it. We have other team members like Ben behind the camera who will do it one day to earn their stripes. But that only has to happen once. You don't have to do that every year. You mix up a slurry of cow manure and then you take that water slurry manure mix, put it in the methane digester. Then you wait 2 weeks and it's like magic. The tank on the top that's empty with sandbags on it slowly fills with pressurized methane. And there's a pipe that runs to a grill, a burner, that you can put inside your home, your cabin, your yurt, your tiny house. And it works just like any other propane grill. It's got an igniter, an ignition. So you twist the knob and then methane comes out, it lights it, and you've got a blue flame. It doesn't smell any different than propane. People in our comments joke that we're cooking on cow farts. That is basically true, actually. But because it's a free fuel source, we think it's awesome. Now, after a while, you're just cooking on food waste that has the methanogens from the cow manure. So every day we'll take food waste that we don't feed to our black soldier fly larvae. We'll take that to the Home Biogas system, and it can take a few liters of food waste per day. Once a week, we top the system off with more water. And as you can imagine, liquid will come out the other end of the methane digester. We've got a 5-gallon bucket set up for that. We've drilled a hole for the pipe to fit in snugly. I've got toddlers and I don't want them messing with that liquid fertilizer. It is all organic, but that doesn't mean it's safe. And my toddlers have been known to drink things that are liquidy. So be advised, you want to handle that liquid fertilizer with care because it is dealing with animal manure. So we'll take food waste, veggie scraps, spoiled meat or milk, starches, moldy bread. The Home Biogas system loves starches. That makes methane gas like nothing else. We get up to 2 hours of clean burning cooking fuel per day. So on shady days, if we're not using the solar oven, we'll fire up a kettle of tea, cook scrambled eggs, make a pot of chili on the methane digester itself. One note, the methane digester will not perform optimally under 68 degrees Fahrenheit as an average temperature. You can go lower than 68 degrees in the night times as long as the temperature during the day is higher. You want your average daily temp to be 68 degrees. We use the liquid fertilizer in our garden. We use the cooking fuel to cook food on our back deck. We're excited to hook up more methane digesters for our micro cabin and our tiny house, and even our canvas tent. The methane digester can even function as an off-grid septic system. Home Biogas makes this flush toilet that connects directly to the methane digester. Now, there's some caveats. You would not use the liquid effluent for fertilizing gardens because it has human waste at that point. You would make a leach bed of wood chips or have a small grove of blueberry bushes, comfrey, bamboo, some other type of plant that can then use that nutrients. But you want woody stems. You don't want plants that are like spinach or leafy greens because then you could have the issue of E. coli contamination. Basically, it's an above-ground septic system, which an actual septic system can cost $15,000, $20,000. The Home Biogas system with a toilet connection costs about $1,500. So it's an amazing toilet setup for a tiny house, a yurt, an off-grid cabin. I like it a lot because unlike a composting toilet where you're using peat or sawdust and you've got to manually change that out, the Home Biogas system works just like a flush toilet. It uses water, but it uses 1/10 the water of a traditional toilet system. The home biogas toilet system is something that's more familiar because toilets are a funny thing with off-grid living. Many people are freaked out by using a different type of toilet, like a composting toilet or even a home biogas toilet, when they hear about it. But when they see the home biogas toilet, it's a white ceramic toilet that flushes. It's such a normal step for people that are really used to their on-grid suburban lifestyle. So we are big fans of cooking with solar energy, cooking with home biogas methane. I threw in the toilet bit. I kind of jumped the gun. Sanitation is coming later in the course. This was supposed to be talking about just cooking, but y'all have a preview for what's to come. So both of these are renewable energy sources, and they both effectively have zero emissions. The solar oven has no emissions as it operates. Technically, the methane oven, when you're cooking and you burn off the methane, it converts it into CO2. But compared to the methane that would be released if you put the food waste in a landfill, it is reducing emissions compared to what would be happening otherwise. They're both very energy efficient. They give you local power to cook locally, to fertilize locally, to create local energy. And you're retaining nutrients through the liquid fertilizer. People get a kick out of learning about these systems because they look interesting, they look different. Most of us haven't seen systems like this. Your next steps. Check out methane digesters for home biogas below. You can also DIY one with IBC tanks. We'll have a link for that. You can purchase your own home biogas system. We recommend Home Biogas. There really aren't any other brands available in the US right now. There's a really cool brand called B Energy in Germany, and they do a lot of work in Africa. And I believe there's a Chinese brand called Puxin. I'll link to both of them, but I can't recommend them because I haven't tried them yet. Then we'll have a link to making your own solar oven. We'll have a link to the Gosun solar ovens that our team really likes. And we would just recommend, if you can purchase one of these systems and try it out, let us know what you think. We love incorporating these into our day-to-day living. Today we're talking composting and liquid fertilizer. These are the cornerstone ways that we build nutrients, we build soil, we build microbial life in our Acorn Land Lab garden. So just to give you a little bit of background on the Acorn Land Lab garden, it is a 1/4 acre lot in a historic town in Georgia. That 1/4 acre lot, I purchased it 4 or 5 years ago. It was just a vacant lot with some junk on it that the neighbor had. The soil is hard, compacted clay. There was grass and weeds on the hard, compacted clay, but it was not suited to be a garden, not yet at least. So it takes work to fix hard clay or soil that's not ready to be a garden. For a garden, you want black, fluffy, loamy soil that you can squeeze and a little water comes out, soil that doesn't crumble, soil that's got worms in it and microbes and bugs and mycelium and mushrooms. It should smell sweet. It should have a mix of organic matter, a little bit of clay, a little bit of sand. It should be loamy. Loamy is what you want for a good garden soil. So we're starting with red Georgia clay out there 4 or 5 years ago. And it was just my wife and I working in the garden at that time. We knew how to compost decently. We weren't pro composters then. But we would save all of our food waste, our paper towels. I would rake up leaves or some leaves during the fall. You want to leave a lot of leaves for the pollinators and the luna moths and all the other insects that, hibernate in the leaves. So we'd leave leaves around the edge of our yard, but I would rake up leaves off our driveway, and then I would take grass clippings from the summer. We would pile all that biomass together. So the leaves are carbon, the grass clippings have primarily nitrogen. We take all that yard debris, and rather than bag it up and let the county take it or the garbage collection company take it, we would put it in big piles, our composting piles. And then we take our food waste, our food scraps, that includes coffee grounds, banana peels, vegetable peelings like potato peelings, zucchini, the ends of onions. Like if it grew out of the ground and it's a scrap, it's compostable. Even avocado shells and avocado pits. We would use paper towels too for carbon. All that material goes in the compost pail. We would just keep a metal compost pail on our kitchen counter. And every day we'd have 5 to 6 pounds of compostable material that we're keeping out of the landfill. So we take all that compostable material, put it on the piles of leaves and grass clippings. You don't want sticks in your compost pile. You don't want sticks, you don't want plastic, you don't want metal, you don't want anything with Roundup. If you have Roundup on your grass, don't put that in your compost pile. That'll kill your vegetables. You don't want Grazing. If you're getting manure, horse manure or cow manure from a field and the farmer is spraying a toxic pesticides or herbicide like Grazing, you don't want that in your garden. So you don't want sticks, you don't want wood chips. Those take forever to decompose. Those are great for pathways, not great for compost piles. So all that biomass goes into piles. And then over time it decomposes. The bigger you make the pile, the faster the microbial action is going to take place and it's going to heat up and decompose. Part of the key though for proper compost is having the right balance of browns and greens. Browns are primarily carbon materials. Greens are primarily nitrogen materials. The thing about those elements is grass clippings, coffee grounds, food waste. It's a mixture of both carbon and nitrogen. So your typical rule of thumb is you want a ratio of 3 browns to 1 green. So for every pound of leaves, of shredded paper, of shredded cardboard, you want to have 1 pound of grass clippings or coffee grounds or nitrogen heavy material. So that's going to be a little bit different for everybody based on your climate, your conditions. You're going to keep that compost pile wet. It needs to have water in it, it needs to be wet, it needs to be covered to keep bugs, like flies buzzing around and to keep, odors down. But when you're properly managing your compost, it really doesn't stink at all. Composting is an aerobic process. Aerobic means with air. So you want to turn your compost every few weeks. It means you literally shake it up and move it from one pile to another. So we use shovels and pitchforks to turn our compost every week or so. That allows air to get back into the compost decomposition process because the microbes breaking down the nitrogen and carbon materials, they need oxygen to do that, to respirate. So composting is an aerobic process. It smells a lot better than anaerobic processes. The methane digester is an anaerobic process. It means without oxygen. It's happening typically in a waterlogged, aqueous environment like a swamp. And you get way more swampy smells. That's where liquid fertilizer comes in, and we'll get to that in a minute. So aerobic composting needs high oxygen levels, it has faster decomposition, it's got reduced odor, it retains nutrients from your food waste, your yard materials and debris. Compost improves soil structure. So compost itself is not soil yet. It needs to be mixed in with your red clay, with your sand, with your loam. It needs the minerals. Then your compost adds organic biomass, organic matter, to your soil. And then you're adding to your nutrient bank in your garden. So you want your soil to get thicker and better and fluffier year after year after year. You do not want to walk on top of your raised beds. You don't want to walk in your rows because when you compact soil, you squish it down and there's less room for water and air. You want fluffy, light soil. So it's okay to be a little militant about keeping other people and yourself and animals off your garden rows. You don't want them compressed. You want fluffy soil. So we started by tilling the red clay because there was no other way to do it. You had to break that red clay up. And then we planted a cover crop of clover to add more nitrogen into the soil, and we mowed that down. And then we just kept adding more compost, more leaves. We get coffee grounds from the coffee shop on the town square. We get horse manure from an organic horse farm. We sometimes get cow manure. We've got paper products we shred. We've got all the food waste. We've got the leaves, the grass clippings. All of that has been giving us every few months another inch of black soil. And we build that black soil layer by layer by layer. We've got pallets that delineate our composting bays in the land lab garden. So we are actually building soil out there and sequestering carbon. Industrial ag farms with the giant combines and the huge tillers, the way that they spread fertilizer and they till, they're losing soil every year. Soil is getting washed out and eroded and flowing into rivers, creeks, and streams, and a lot of it's going straight down the Mississippi and being flushed into the Gulf of Mexico. That's not sustainable for the long term. Farmers cannot continue to farm if the soil is being depleted and worn out. Crop yields will diminish and decrease year after year. And as you continue to apply more synthetic fertilizers, more chemicals, NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, that is going to burn out your soil. You burn out the microbial structure, you burn out the mycelium. Composting increases the microbial structure. It increases the mycelium. Adding biochar to your compost helps you make that rich black earth. So composting is a huge element. It's a cornerstone of what we do in the land lab. If you're going to have a permaculture vegetable garden operation, if you're going to have an organic garden, you've got to compost. There's no other way around it. That creates a closed loop for the nutrient cycle. So let's move on from compost to anaerobic liquid fertilizer. If you Google JADAM, J-A-D-A-M, that's a Korean method. It's a whole different concept than composting from brewing fermented organic fertilizers. So we've got these giant 80-gallon pickle barrels that have a spigot tapped into the bottom. That's where we create our liquid organic fertilizer using the JADAM method. I'll link to JADAM down below. So the liquid fertilizer is great because it's basically just an extension of our home biogas methane digester. What we do is we take water and we let it off gas. We let the chlorine from the city water off gas. Now we're using more and more rainwater with our rainwater collection system in place. But we fill up our big black tanks with water. Then we go get weeds, kudzu, grass clippings, all kinds of green biomass. Put that green biomass in the tanks filled with water. And then we go find some leaf mold. We find some soil in the forest and throw that in there. That's got the microbes to kick off that fermentation anaerobic digestion process, much like the manure in the home biogas system. So it takes longer than composting often, but the methanogens and the fermentation process occurs in those big tanks with the liquid fertilizer, much like it does in the home biogas system. Now, be advised, it has a strong smell when you do it properly. We know the days that the garden team has fertilized out there. You can smell it. But the reality is you can smell synthetic fertilizers too. Fertilizers are just one of those things, they're not going to smell great no matter how you slice or dice it. But this one is totally organic and it's renewable, it's sustainable. So the liquid fertilizers that we ferment out there take a few weeks, but once they fermented, we then dilute them in water and then we spread those across our raised beds and our garden rows. And just to give you an idea of how productive our garden is now, the first year when it was just my wife and I composting, we ate maybe 30 or so meals that were 80% from the garden that summer. The first year we ran Acorn Land Lab out there, when we truly built up the land lab, we harvested over 1,000 pounds of produce. This year, we're not even done with the harvest season yet, and we've harvested 2,300 pounds of produce from that garden. So you can see year over year, we're getting more and more and more abundance from that garden. The garden will continue to deliver if we keep investing in it with compost and liquid fertilizer. Now we add other things like biochar, bone meal. We've gotten bags of lime to put out there depending on the pH needs of the soil. It's a whole cocktail. It's a whole art. It's a very imperfect art that needs trial and error. But composting and liquid fertilizer are the basis for how we fertilize the garden space. And it's only a 4,000 square foot garden area and we don't have very dense rows and we have tremendous yields. So I'll have some more links in the bottom, but the next steps for you would be saving your food waste and beginning to either compost yourself or take your food waste to makesoil.org drop-off locations. If you're in an apartment, find some local community gardens where you can take your composting scraps to. Start your first composting pile or buy a composting roller to keep it tidier if you're in a suburban backyard. If you're in an apartment, use Make Soil like I mentioned, or use a food waste processor. Lomi is a food waste processor, and then Niviop. I'll have links to both down below. If you're feeling really hardcore, get a barrel with a tapped spigot in the bottom. Start making your own liquid fertilizer using the JADAM method. I'll have a link down below as well. We're in our final section in the food systems chapter. Our topic today is going to be food waste. We've touched on this in the previous sections, but we're really going to dig deeper today as a summary on all the ways you can use food waste and why our food waste problem globally, but in the US in particular, is so bad. Wasted food really is a travesty and should never happen. So we're going to talk about how to prevent it, talk about the issues so you have a clear picture of what's happening, and talk about all the useful ways you can use food waste. So a recap from our food system issues video: food waste. 2.5 billion tons of food is wasted annually globally. That is valued at around $230 billion. It's estimated that with $330 billion, we could end world hunger over a 10-year period. That amount of food waste would be 2/3 or more of what it would take to end world hunger over 10 years. That's insane. Our agricultural food systems are responsible for about 70% of the water extracted from nature. A lot of that is with industrial ag, which is not sustainable. So we've got to change up the way that we're growing food because we're depleting our aquifers and our reservoirs at a rapid rate in areas like the American West, parts of South Africa, areas in the Middle East, in Australia. The world's food waste could feed 2 billion people annually. We have 8 billion people on Earth. 2 billion people is 25% of all people we could feed just with what we waste. The average American family wastes 250 pounds of food every year. 250 pounds. This makes it more understandable for us and our small scale living. But a family of 4 wastes on average 250 pounds of food every year. That is a value of about $1,600 a year. You're throwing out $1,600 in wasted food. The U.S. consumer wastes about 1/3 of all purchased food. Let that sink in. 1/3 of the food you purchase every year is wasted. Waste is going to happen. It just does. Leftovers are going to get spoiled. People don't always finish their meal. Toddlers. I have 2 toddlers. Toddlers waste a ton of food. And it's going to happen. We try to minimize waste, but what do we do with food waste? Because it is inevitable. Food will spoil. Food is not always purchased in grocery stores. Sometimes food comes to you already spoiled from a grocery store. Sometimes there's just extra and it's not eaten. Sometimes it's forgotten about. So if food waste is inevitable, the big questions are, how do we minimize food waste? And with the food waste that we do have, how can we use it properly? How can we make it a useful product instead of a waste? So let me go ahead and just hit the big points. I'm going to review the ways that we use food waste on our off-grid environments, our land lab, and our homesteads. If the food waste is fresh, we feed it to our chickens. We have a flock of about 40 chickens and then 10 at my house, and then another 20 chickens on the Acorn Land Lab. So chickens will chase down almost any food scrap. Chickens will eat meat. We don't feed our chickens chicken. That would be kind of messed up. But we will feed our chickens pork scraps, beef scraps, fish scraps, because chickens are omnivores. They eat vegetable matter and proteins, meat, insects. So that's the first way we get rid of most of our food waste. Most of our food waste, we turn into free eggs by feeding it to the chickens. And it's really simple. If you're picturing us giving a bowl of food to the chickens, that's not how it works. We go on our back deck and we pitch the food off the back deck onto the grass, and the chickens come running. They know when we're about to throw food waste at them. Well, not at them, but in the backyard. So we'll come out there, and our keyword for the chickens is chuck chuck. So when the chickens hear chuck chuck, they come charging like an army across the backyard, and they will devour the food waste we throw in the backyard. It could be leftover rice from the toddlers. It could be old bread. It could be vegetable scraps, vegetable peelings, old meat scraps, leftovers. They'll eat it all. That's the first way we get rid of food waste. And that honestly takes care of about 80% of our food waste. The next layer is feeding food waste to our pigs. The chickens typically will eat all of it, but if there's too much, we'll give some to the pigs as well. The chickens are faster, so the pigs take a minute to get to it. Both chickens and pigs are omnivores. They will eat all that food waste. Herbivores like cows and sheep, they're not going to eat the variety that chickens and pigs will. And that's okay. They're meant to be eating grass as they are ruminants. So if we've got old and yucky and gross, nasty food waste, we put that in the methane digester, which gives us liquid fertilizer for the garden as a byproduct. And it gives us clean burning cooking fuel up to 2 hours every day. So we turn nasty food waste into free fertilizer and free cooking fuel on our grill top. If we have too much food waste for the methane digester, we take that other rotted, nasty food waste to the black soldier fly biopod. They will eat the food waste, they'll extract the nutrients, and then they are a clean protein and fat source for the chickens. So we can turn our food waste into free eggs, free bacon, free cooking fuel, free fertilizer, and free animal feed with grub protein. We have no food waste that's actually going to a landfill at our house anymore. It is all turned into a useful product. And the fail-safe is composting it. If we can't use it in all those other systems for whatever reason, we compost it. We cannot get enough food waste here. So at our land lab and our homes, we're getting food waste from restaurants. We're getting coffee grounds from restaurants. We don't actually throw away anything at our homes. We're a net sink for food waste. We are a food waste negative environment. If every home and business was a food waste negative environment, we wouldn't send any food waste to landfills at all. I predict that in the next decade, more and more people are going to wise up to all these ways of using food waste, and soon one man's trash will become another man's treasure. Food waste is a valuable commodity, and I'm trying to get it from as many restaurants as I possibly can. Within reason, we only need so much for our systems, and we use every scrap of the food waste at our homes. So today it's viewed as garbage. In the years to come, I believe more people will see it for the valuable stream that it is. So let's see, have we missed anything? Circular economy is a great term for this. In a circular economy, nothing is wasted. So making sure that your food waste is being converted into animal feed, eggs, bacon, methane fuel, fertilizer, black soldier flies, compost, that is the best example of a circular economy. A linear economy is where minerals are mined for fertilizers, fossil fuels are used to make fertilizers, fertilizers are made, they're sprayed onto big farms, they're used to grow industrial corn and soy. That's used to feed animals or make, junk food. That food is then thrown away in the landfill and the nutrients ends up stuck in that landfill and methane escapes into the atmosphere. That's a linear system. That's a linear economy. That is not sustainable. You're moving nutrients, you're moving minerals, you're moving soil from here to here, and it's never reconnecting. When you bend that line into a loop, a circle, now it's circular, now it's sustainable, now it's a circular economy. So your next steps, stop throwing away your food waste. It's valuable. If you're in an apartment, I understand it's more tricky. Set up a vermicomposting system for worms to eat your food waste and convert it into worm castings and worm tea. Get a Lomi or a Niviop compost prep machine. It bakes the food waste and grinds it up into almost like a powder that you can then use to fertilize your plants or take to a community garden. Get a home biogas unit to turn your food waste into clean cooking fuel or fertilizer, liquid fertilizer. Feed your food waste to chickens and pigs if you've got them or if you're nearby a homesteader or a community garden with animals. Grow black soldier fly larvae. Compost your food waste. There are so many ways of using it. It really is a shame and it's a travesty, honestly, to throw it in the landfill. Food waste should never go into the landfill, ever. So start those processes, start the ones you can. Teach your family and friends about how to use their food waste properly. And research more about the issue. Learn about how you can even help restaurants divert food waste. Home biogas makes industrial-sized methane digesters for restaurants to be able to convert their food waste into methane gas for heating water, cooking, and producing other forms of energy through the methane. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. This is the end of the food chapter and the food systems chapter. I will see you in the next section.